Welcome to Employee Termination Tips. My name is Christopher Neufeld of Neufeld Legal. And in this particular video, we're going to be discussing what is a statutory deemed trust in an employment law context. And to start off, we have to understand what the legal concept of a trust is. And that is an arrangement whereby one person, a trustee, holds property as its nominal owner for the good or benefit of another person, and that person is the beneficiary. So in this context, we're looking actually at the trustee being the employer and the beneficiary being the employee. So you have to remember that as your core principle as we look through this aspect of a statutory deemed trust created for the benefit of an employee. And remember, in a lot of these trust arrangements, what you'll find in law is that they are created formally by a trust document. And that's the common law context of it. However, what we're talking about with a statutory deemed trust is that it's created by statute, typically by provincial employment standards legislation. So the legislation creates the trust, and here's the critical thing, that oftentimes the employer doesn't even realize the trust is created, but it's created by a function of law, and it's unavoidable. The law created by the legislature says that this trust exists, and the employer cannot say it does not exist, I don't want it to exist, what have you. Where it does exist, and it exists in every context, it exists and the employer cannot avoid it, and the employee will get the benefit of it. Now, how does it work in this context? Well, it works with respect to ensuring that all payments of wages, and oftentimes all payments of overtime pay, vacation pay, and or general holiday pay have been paid to the employee. And when certain amounts of those payments have not been made, but they've been earned, remember, the employers earn them by law, those amounts are in effect held in trust by the employer for the benefit of the employee. So when we're talking about back pay and we're talking about underpayments due to employees, due as a result of the employer failing to calculate these various types of payments correctly, where the legislation specifies that all or some of these payments are to be held in trust, well then, they're held in trust by the employer as long as necessary for the benefit of the employee, and until such time as the employee who has a legal entitlement to them calls upon the employer to pay them. Because these monies, even though they've been commingled with the other accounts because they have not been paid, but they have not been probably realized oftentimes by the employer has not made the effort to correctly calculate amounts, and such as committing underpayments, well, that money that is earned but unpaid to the employee is simply being held in trust. And it's a function of the employment standards legislation. I don't want to sound too convoluted and twisted, but what I'm saying is the legislation creates a trust, creates a holding structure within which the employer nominally holds the money, but is holding it the entire time for the benefit of the employee. And this benefit can be held for years, even possibly for decades. And it's simply a matter of the employee calling out their employer or their former employer and saying, look, I earned this money. You miscalculated how much I am owed. Upon a correct calculation, you missed 5%, you missed 2%, you missed 10%, you missed some percentage. And that percentage of unpaid money is effectively being held in trust by yourself for my benefit based upon the employment standards legislation of our province. And if your province has employment standards legislation that creates a statutory deemed trust, whether it's for some or for all of these kinds of payments, then those amounts are properly collectible. Naturally, employers are not going to want to budge initially because not many people have challenged them on this before, but this is the law and they are subject to the law. And it is a trust structure that they cannot avoid. It is created by law and they're obligated to abide by it. And what your position is that is your earned money. You are legally entitled to it. The employment standards legislation creates the obligation for the employer to hold it in trust, irrespective of how they did it. And when it's called upon, it's time for them to pay. Fortunately, if they're going to push back, you might have to get a lawyer. You might have to file a lawsuit. But that's how it is to get your money sometimes. But it is a statutory deemed trust that is created in employment law that holds onto this earned money that has been unpaid but has been earned and to which the employee is legally entitled to as the beneficiary of that money who can call upon it. No, it's a somewhat challenging subject to talk about, but it's the reality that most people don't fully realize and appreciate. Even most lawyers don't appreciate and recognize this. And hopefully with this video, both lawyers and employees will see the value behind this, because a statutory deemed trust is a very powerful tool for employees to collect upon the money that they are owed, because it has been earned and the money is due to the employees. There's a lot more to it, but hopefully that has provided you some conceptualization of the concept of statutory deemed trust in the employment law context. Thank you.